My name is Amina Jallo, and this morning, the senior director who called me a clumsy amateur in front of our entire board is watching his life's work evaporate while my fiancé, Noah Kingsley, decides whether he belongs in a boardroom or a prison cell. There is a specific, cinematic rhythm to the way power shifts when the truth is finally allowed to speak. In the sterile, glass-walled offices of New Jersey, they thought my Gambian heritage and my quiet demeanor made me an easy target for their failures. They believed that because I didn't shout, I didn't have a voice. They were wrong. Have you ever been publicly shamed for a mistake that wasn't yours? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I came to America with a degree in logistics and a heart full of hope, settling into a role as a procurement assistant at a massive industrial firm. I am a woman of precision. I see the world through supply chains and cost-benefit analyses. For 2 years, I worked twice as hard as my peers, only to find myself in a lion's den of corruption. The senior staff, led by a man named Richard Thorne, had been skimming millions through inflated supplier contracts. When the discrepancies became too large to hide, they needed a fall person. They chose the quiet woman from West Africa, assuming I was too grateful for my job to fight back. The public shaming happened during our quarterly supplier summit. Richard Thorne stood at the head of the long oak table, surrounded by the city's most influential vendors. He tossed a stack of falsified reports toward me, the paper sliding across the wood like a slap. Amina, I've tried to be patient with your cultural learning curve, Richard said, his voice loud enough to carry into the hallway where other employees had gathered to watch. But your incompetence has cost this firm nearly $3 million in overpayments. You've mismanaged our most critical accounts. This isn't a marketplace back home. This is high-stakes American industry. You are fired, effective immediately. Pack your desk and leave before I have security escort you out for gross negligence. The room was filled with the heavy silence of collective judgment. I saw the smirks on the faces of the other senior directors, the men who had actually signed the kickback deals. I felt the sting of hot tears prickling my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I stood up slowly, my dignity the only thing I had left to carry. The numbers do not lie, Mr. Thorne, I said softly, my voice steady, despite the trembling in my soul. Only the people who write them do. I walked out of that building without a backward glance, leaving behind 2 years of my life. But Richard Thorne didn't realize that the woman he had just publicly executed was the fiancée of Noah Kingsley. Noah is a man of few words and absolute power. To the public, he is a venture capitalist and a pillar of the New Jersey elite. In the world where real decisions are made, he is the head of a syndicate that ensures the gears of the city turn in his favor. He is a man who operates with a calculated, terrifying intelligence, a mafia boss who believes that an insult to his family is an invitation for total destruction. When I walked into our home that evening and told him what had happened, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't even get up from his desk. He simply closed his laptop and looked at me with eyes that had turned to cold gray steel. Amina Jallo Kingsley, he said, using my full name with a weight that made the air feel heavy. You are a woman of grace. Tomorrow, they will learn the price of mistaking that grace for weakness. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate dismantling. Noah didn't use a single weapon other than the truth and the sheer weight of his influence. He activated his team of forensic accountants, men who could find a hidden penny in a desert. He reached out to the suppliers Thorne had been overcharging, men who were more than happy to talk once they realized Noah Kingsley was the one asking the questions. By the time Monday morning arrived, the trap was set. I walked back into the firm at 10 a.m., dressed in a sharp ivory power suit that contrasted beautifully with my skin. Beside me was Noah, his presence radiating an aura of lethal authority that caused the lobby to go silent the moment we entered. We walked past the security desk. The guards stood at attention, recognizing Noah instantly, and took the private elevator to the executive floor. We walked into the boardroom mid-meeting. Richard Thorne was sitting in the same chair he had occupied when he shamed me, laughing with his associates. When he saw me, he stood up, his face flushing with a mixture of annoyance and arrogance. Amina, I thought I made myself clear. You are no longer welcome on these premises. If you've come to beg for your job, you're wasting your time. And who is this? He looked at Noah, his lip curling into a sneer. Your legal counsel? It doesn't matter. The records are sealed. Noah walked to the head of the table, not waiting for an invitation. He pulled out the chair for me, and I sat down with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Noah leaned over the table, his hands flat on the mahogany, staring directly into Richard's eyes. My name is Noah Kingsley, he said, his voice a low, dangerous velvet. And I don't beg, I collect. I've spent the last 2 days reviewing your procurement files, Richard. Not the ones you project on the screens, but the ones you keep in the Cayman accounts. The ones where you've been funneling 3% of every contract into a shell company called Vanguard North. The room became so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Richard's face went from red to a sickly, pale gray. I don't know what you're talking about. Those are private corporate records. They were private, I said, sliding a thick folder across the table toward him. Until Noah bought the bank that manages your offshore transfers this morning. I've spent the last 12 hours cross-referencing your incompetence reports with the actual wire transfers. It turns out I didn't cost the firm $3 million. You did. And you used my name to hide the trail. Noah tapped a button on his phone. Instantly, the massive monitors in the boardroom flickered to life, showing a live feed of the firm's treasury accounts. In real time, the numbers began to drop to zero. What are you doing? Another director shouted, panic finally setting in. That's company capital. That's evidence, Noah replied, his expression as cold as a winter morning. I've frozen every account associated with this board. I've also taken the liberty of sending the unredacted files to the Attorney General's office. They're currently waiting in the lobby to take your statements. The collapse was brutal in its efficiency. Richard Thorne, the man who had mocked my origin and my intelligence, collapsed into his chair as if the bones had been removed from his body. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He realized then that he hadn't just fired a procurement assistant. He had declared war on the one man in the state who could erase him from existence. You're destroying the company, Thorne whispered. I'm cleansing it, I replied, standing up. You thought you could use me as a shield because I'm an immigrant. You thought I was a girl who would be too afraid of a scandal to fight back. But I am a woman of the Jallo family, and we do not break. Noah walked around the table and took my hand, his grip warm and unshakable. He looked at the broken men around the table, the ones who had sat in silence while I was humiliated. The firm will continue under new management, Noah said. Management that understands the value of integrity. Amina will be overseeing the transition as the new chief operating officer. The rest of you have exactly 5 minutes to leave before the feds come up those elevators. We walked out of the boardroom together, leaving behind the wreckage of their corruption. As we passed through the atrium where I had been shamed just days before, the employees stood in silence, watching the man they feared escort the woman they had underestimated. I didn't look back. I didn't feel the need for a victory lap. The peace I felt was cinematic. A slow-motion realization that justice had been served with absolute precision. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal filings and corporate restructuring. Richard Thorne and his associates were in within the week, their names becoming synonymous with the very scandal they had tried to pin on me. I took my seat as COO, not out of a desire for power, but out of a responsibility to rebuild the firm into a place where someone's heritage would never again be used as a weapon against them. I remember sitting in my new office a month later, looking out at the New Jersey skyline. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the city. Noah walked in, carrying a small box of my favorite Gambian sweets. He sat on the edge of my desk, his presence a constant, protective force. Was it worth it? He asked softly. The justice was? I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. But the realization that I am finally safe, that's what matters most. I realized then that my journey from the Gambia to the executive suite of a New Jersey firm wasn't just about my own ambition. It was about finding the strength to stand tall in a world that wanted me to bow. Noah hadn't just saved me, he had empowered me to reclaim the name that Richard Thorne had tried to steal. He was the instrument of karma, but I was the architect of the truth. I am Amina Jallo. I am a leader, a survivor, and a woman who knows that true power is the ability to walk away from a fire without a single burn. My story is no longer one of humiliation, it is a story of absolute triumph. And as I look out at the world I've helped build, I know that for every woman who is told she doesn't belong, there is a path to a front row seat, if she only has the courage to wait for the balance to be restored. Karma is a patient designer. It weaves a garment of justice that always fits perfectly in the end. Richard Thorne is a ghost in a prison cell, and I am a woman of grace, sitting in the light. The city is quiet now, the accounts are balanced, the truth has risen, and the power has crumbled. And for a woman who was once told she was an amateur, the view from the top is exactly as it should be. Permanent, beautiful, and just. I look at Noah, and I see the man who watched the world try to shame me and decided to give me the world instead. We walk out of the office together, the shadows of the past finally disappearing behind us. The story is over, but our life is just beginning. And in this life, no one will ever mistake our grace for weakness again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more Mafia love and justice stories. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.